Let's talk about baking. So I know when you are a newly diagnosed celiac, it can be a bit confusing trying to get your head around baking and how to get baked goods to behave how you're used to. My name's Alana and I am an ambassador for Coeliac New Zealand, and I'm here to quickly talk you through some different flours to give you a couple of quick tips to help your gluten-free baking. So first off, we have a range of different gluten-free flours on the table in front of us, and I want to quickly talk to you about them. So first thing, when you're looking at your flour, you can't use regular wheat or spelt flour. Those obviously contain gluten. So instead you're going to look for a gluten-free option. It needs to stay gluten-free on the packet. So we've got a couple of different options here. We have Fresh Life, who state the product is gluten-free. This means it must meet the New Zealand food safety standards for the gluten-free definition. And then we also, if we look at the Bakewell's packet, you can see that this one has the endorsement of Coeliac New Zealand. So you know it's going to be a good choice when moving on to a gluten-free diet. Next up, we have different types of flour. So you'll see that we have almond flour. This flour is often used to give baking better texture and to hold in more moisture. We have coconut flour. Now this is a really thirsty flour. You can't just add coconut flour in a recipe without adjusting the liquid content. This is going to soak up a lot more of your moisture. So if you're using coconut flour and your baking is turning out heavy or dry, it will be because the coconut flour is absorbing all that moisture and making your baking solid, and it probably won't rise. So if you're going to use coconut flour, adjust the liquid ratio or try and find a tried and true recipe that's already using it. We have buckwheat flour. This is has quite a sort of nutty flavour to it, and it's often a favourite for making pancakes. So if you're wanting to try buckwheat pancakes, then check out this. And then we've got rice flour. Now rice flour on its own is not going to give you good baking. It needs to be mixed with a couple of other starches to give your baking more stretch and sort of fluffiness to it. So if you're going to use rice flour, you're going to need to mix it with a couple of other flours as well. So corn flour or potato starch would be common ones as well. Okay, then over this side we have different baking mixes here. So there's heaps of these on the market. If you're not a confident baker, then we'd suggest starting with a baking mix. Essentially, you can often swap gluten-containing flour, so like wheat-based flour, out on a 1-to-1 ratio, so 1 cup of gluten flour for 1 cup of a gluten-free baking mix. So these baking mixes will contain a mixture of different gluten-free flours, and they're most likely to give you sort of a good outcome with your baking. So consider getting yourself a baking mix. You can find self-raising or all-purpose / plain gluten-free flour mixes. So start with those and then come back and play with these individual flours once you've found your feet and got a bit of confidence. Now, I have some other quick tips for you if you are just going down the journey of gluten-free baking. Tip number 1 is grab yourself a set of electronic scales. This means you can weigh out your flour, and that can make a huge difference to sort of the quality of the baked goods you get at the end. So if you don't have electronic scales yet, go and grab some. They're pretty cheap from Briscoe's or somewhere like the Warehouse. The other thing you might find you need to grab is some guar gum or xanthan gum. These act as sort of a binder in your gluten-free baking, so it can stop it being as crumbly, it can help it retain texture, and sometimes it can help it maintain its fresh taste for longer. Now, if you are making muffins, just be aware that gluten-free muffins will tend to feel a bit stodgy or heavy the next day. This is normal, and that's okay. With your muffins, just pop them in the microwave for 10 to 20 seconds when you're ready to eat them, and that will be enough to refresh the muffin, make it lovely and moist again, and make it delicious to eat. So don't give up on your muffins, you might just need to microwave them. And then finally, if you are really struggling with your gluten-free baking, then go for a look in your gluten-free aisle and see if you can find some baking mixes. Countdown has a range, so does Bakewell's, and they really can help. They can at least get you started on your gluten-free baking journey, and they contain pre-made mixes of ingredients where you only need to add a couple of extra things to the baking mix, and you'll end up with a gorgeous chocolate cake or brownies or banana loaf, depending on the packet mix you choose. Right, well, I those tips have helped. If you have questions about gluten-free baking, feel free to let us know.